here at my house today shooting for the kindness issue with my three daughters, Eliza, who's 8, and Pippa, who is 3, and Lucinda, who we call Lucky, and she's 10 months old. I think having children completely redefines the word kindness. I think before you have children, it's easy to confuse kindness for like a kind of like politeness. And I think that that's 100% not what kindness is. I think kindness has a lot more to do with authenticity and allowing for the people that you encounter, as well as for yourself, to fully express who they are. And when you have children, they're these miraculous people who come into your life. And if you want to not be violent to their unfolding, you have to really, really recognize that each person is different and similar. But I think kindness has to do with letting them be who they are.
Caterina Scorsone is best known for playing Dr. Amelia Shepard on the hit ABC medical dramas Private Practice and Grey's Anatomy.
You should be on a high right now. And you should be chasing that high for the rest of your life. You defeated death.
But the actress and mother of 3 has also become a passionate advocate for those with cognitive diversities and disabilities, a journey that began back in 2016 when her daughter Pippa was born with Down syndrome.
I think when Pippa was born, it was like a huge period of like redefining parenthood and love and relationship with everyone around me. And I didn't know what her abilities were going to be when she was first born. With Down syndrome, there's such a range of abilities. And so you kind of, when you first receive the diagnosis, your mind as a parent has to be so open, because maybe, like Pippa, she's going to be talking and doing sign language and singing and dancing. And maybe she's going to have some challenges that are going to make that take a lot longer. You're not sure. You stop making assumptions about anything. I think for a lot of parents, you assumed that your baby would have a particular number of chromosomes. You know what I mean? And that assumption wasn't fair to any child, typical or otherwise. Like, I think so many parents, even of typical kids, are assuming that they understand how their kid's life is going to unfold and what their kid's personality is going to be like. And so when you totally fracture that expectation right, when they're born, I think you get to enter into a presence with your kid and with everyone else where, again, assumptions go out the window and you actually have to encounter them with kind of a soft curiosity where every moment you're like, who are you? What a gift this moment is. What a gift this day is. And so it's wild. It's pretty cool. There's kind of misconceptions about Down syndrome that, like, people with Down syndrome are always happy. She's not always happy. She is just authentic. So when she's happy, it radiates in a way that is so gorgeous. And when she's pissed off, she's pissed off. And when she's sad, she's genuinely sad. And so I think just seeing that level of honoring of self that she has, this gift of like honoring her authentic moment as a woman, as a mother, I mean, there's so much we can learn from that. One thing I think people don't understand about Pippa, and a lot of members of her community, is that her receptive language, so her ability to kind of hear and understand what you're saying, is way greater than her expressive language. And that has to do with some of her physical differences. She has low muscle tone and a different way of motor planning, and the shape of her mouth is a little bit different. So it actually takes more effort for her to form the words with her tongue and mouth. And so I think a lot of people encounter her, and if she's listening, they think she doesn't understand what she's saying because she's not firing back as quickly as they are. She understands exactly what they're saying. She's just not running her mouth all the time. And so I think that, and she's also very small, and so the tendency is for people to kind of like talk down to her, and she's like, she kind of doesn't have time for it. She's kind of like, really? I think one of the things that surprised me about raising a daughter with special needs was the community. I think when I first realized that Pippa had a diagnosis that made her so different, not that different, but different from some typical kids, some of the fears that came up were about like, oh, I don't know what that looks like, and the community that I'm a part of right now doesn't have that. I haven't seen it modeled. And the amazing thing is that it's such an intense experience to enter into the world of disability when you haven't been in that world, in terms of like reframing your whole perspective, that you're kind of forced to reach out to other parents and other families who have a similar diagnosis or experience. And so there's like an instant intimacy. And so when she was born, I mean, the moms that I encountered, the families that I encountered, there was this just an instant connection that is indescribable. And so I guess that was the biggest surprise, that when she was born, I was scared of being outside of community. And I now realize that we're part of this community in a way that I never could have imagined. I think like the best kept secret is the disability community. I think before you're invited through, the randomness of DNA and fate and circumstance, before you're invited, you probably don't think about it very much at all, but it doesn't seem like a club that you want to be a part of, maybe, if you're not already somehow peripherally involved. But once you're invited, it's almost like you got like your letter from Hogwarts. You're like with Pippa, it's like, I think the statistic is like 1 in 700. So you suddenly are like, I'm the 1 in 700 who got the letter from Hogwarts. and yeah, you're invited into this world of difference. And so all of the expectations about like, oh, we're supposed to all be a certain way or look a certain way or think a certain way or process information a certain way, all of that goes out the window. And at first you're focused on your kid, and like getting them the right therapies, and you think you're like getting them the therapy so that they will be more like typical kids, and then eventually you're like, oh no, that's not why. It's so they'll develop exactly how they're supposed to develop, and then eventually you start applying that to yourself and to your typical friends and family members, and your whole understanding of like self-love explodes. It's amazing. I hope that when people learn about our family, that they start to feel curious and excited about decentering their perspective. I think often in our culture, when we encounter difference, we think that it's somehow outside of some sort of legitimate perspective, and that perspective is usually our own. And I hope that the cultural conversation that's happening right now, and how that applies to our family as well, is that we start seeing that our perspective is a legitimate perspective. It's, that's the experience that we're living. But someone who is having a very different perspective is living just as legitimate an experience, and that we can enjoy and take pleasure in this multiplicity of viewpoints and experiences, instead of thinking that we're competing for the true one or the ground floor of some sort of objective reality. It's subjective. We know this from like physics. It's all subjective. And so if we can start taking pleasure in that idea instead of feeling threatened by it, I think we'll be invited into a kind of bliss that our culture could really use.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.